I'm also smelling like that dead animal smell again. Avocado Lake is a small park and recreational area nestled along the Sierra Nevada mountains just outside of Sanger, California. It is a lake surrounded by orchards and farms, and recently it was a location of a very terrifying encounter. What eyewitnesses described as seeing was a massive werewolf-type creature with a large, muscular human-like body and a canine head. Although personally I do not have an opinion whether or not these creatures do exist, the Avocado Lake area has been the locale for numerous Sasquatch sightings over the years, and I believe this encounter could very easily have been a misidentification and could indicate the Sasquatch have returned to the area. One Sasquatch report that came out of this area took place in a nearby farm. As the owner was returning home late one night, he and his wife spotted a number of Sasquatch in their orchard, presumably raiding their crop. And as they stopped their vehicle, they heard a very loud commotion over near their barn, and they witnessed a very large male Sasquatch powering up a steep hillside, carrying one of the farmer's pigs over its shoulder. Days later, it was learned that a neighboring farmer had also had a similar encounter with a family of Sasquatch that were raiding the fruit from his orchard. With the history of Sasquatch activity in this area and the recent unusual happenings, I've decided to come to the location and conduct an investigation. So we are out in the field and we are investigating the Avocado Lake area, which is just outside of Sanger, California. Now this area has had an abundance of Sasquatch sightings. The Sasquatch come down off the Sierra Nevada mountains and come down into the San Joaquin Valley here to raid the various crops that are nestled just up along the Sierra Nevada mountains. And I have investigated this area before. There are numerous sightings in this area, and I absolutely believe the Sasquatch do come down into this area. However, they don't normally come down into this area until late November, early December. And I think what may be happening here is that the fires that are burning at those higher elevations, just a stone's throw from here, the creek fire and also the bullfrog fire, may be encouraging the Sasquatch to come down into these lower elevations a little earlier this year. Now the sighting that I'm come down here specifically to investigate was not a Sasquatch sighting. There has been a number of sightings around the Avocado Lake area of a creature known as the Dogman. Now this creature is something akin to a werewolf, just a large, muscular, human-like frame with a canine head. And from my understanding, these cryptids are very aggressive and are very prone to attacking humans. So I have to admit I'm a little more apprehensive exploring this area and investigating these sightings, because this area is very thick in vegetation. There's a lot of moving water around with the flowing rivers and so on, so it's very difficult to hear what's going on in your surroundings, especially when using the parabolic microphone. So I have been relying pretty heavily on the FLIR this evening, just to try to stay aware of my surroundings, and hopefully, you know, we can catch something on camera. Now, I'm not here specifically looking for a Dogman. I do believe that a lot of times witnesses will see something and they may be misidentifying things. And I do believe there's a good chance that what these people are actually seeing is a Sasquatch. Okay. There is a very peculiar odor in the air. It definitely smells like something dead, just like a rotting carcass. Yeah, it doesn't smell good at all. So I've been at it for hours. I haven't been able to ascertain what that dead animal smell was, but to be honest, I probably don't want to. It has been very slow going, moving around through the vegetation around the river and around the lake. It's incredibly thick. I did find a couple of game trails that made it a little easier to move around, but for the most part it has been very slow going and very limited in visibility. Even using the FLIR, I can't see so far into the vegetation, so it's been very difficult to kind of get surveillance in this particular area. At this point, the FLIR battery has gone out, so I am in the dark in that regard, and it is getting very late. We are well into the early morning hours. In fact, I won't be surprised if the sun starts coming up here shortly. So we have a full day of investigation tomorrow, and I am going to call it a night, head back to my vehicle, and we will regroup for a full day of investigating tomorrow. So I'm going to go handheld here for a bit so you guys can have a better understanding of what's going on here at Avocado Lake. I'm going to swing the camera around so you can see the lake. So there you have Avocado Lake. It's not an extraordinarily large lake, but it is of good size. The area that you see back in that direction is predominantly the recreational area. Now that's where you're going to have large groups of people picnicking. They're going to be fishing in the lake, and they're going to be spending a lot of time over in that area. But as we swing the camera around, this is where we're getting the activity. And just over this hill here is where the Kings River is feeding in to the San Joaquin Valley and into the Avocado Lake. And you can see it here. And as we come up here, you're going to see the foothills in the background, and you can see the foothills themselves are really bare in vegetation. There's no trees on this particular ridgeline here, but you see along the water, the vegetation is quite thick, and this is the case all the way up into the Sierra Nevada mountains there. So the Sasquatch are definitely moving into the San Joaquin Valley, in my belief, along the Kings River here. I don't think they're taking the Kings River all the way down from up near Wishon Reservoir and Courtright Reservoir. I think they may actually be taking some of the tributary rivers that are feeding into the Kings River. But you can see the vegetation is quite thick all the way down, and the sightings that are occurring on the backside of the river here. And this whole river just creates this oasis of very, very thick vegetation, which makes a perfect vantage point for the Sasquatch to access the San Joaquin Valley, because there's a lot of areas to hide and there's a lot of cover so that they can move through the area with stealth. Investigating the Avocado Lake area and along the Kings River here, it's definitely clear that we have a pretty good idea of why the Sasquatch would be venturing down into this area. As I mentioned before, surrounding Avocado Lake, there's just an abundance of food sources for the Sasquatch, being the various crops in the area. And one thing that I'm kind of just been thinking is I don't think the Sasquatch are going to want to spend a lot of time actually in these various crops and orchards and citrus farms. I think there's just too much activity in that area, and they would kind of be in an enclosed environment that I don't think would necessarily be comfortable for them. So I think that they would go there, but they wouldn't stay there for any length of time. And that does raise some interesting thoughts, at least in my head, is how are the Sasquatch transporting these various food sources that they're finding? There are some Native American stories that the Sasquatch will be seen carrying baskets, and especially in the Pacific Northwest area, where the tribe would speak of the Sasquatch actually snatching children and putting them in baskets and carrying them away. And I'm wondering if there are reports out there where Sasquatch is being spotted carrying not necessarily a basket, but something that resembles some sort of container where they would be carrying a food source. There are reports out there that I've read where Sasquatch would be carrying animals, dead animals, like deer, and also in this area we have the report that the Sasquatch is carrying a pig. So they have been spotted carrying things, but I wonder if there are reports out there with the Sasquatch actually carrying fruits and vegetables and other items in some sort of carrying capacity. Like it could be palm fronds, it could be some sort of vegetation where they can place things into this kind of makeshift basket and carry it with them. I'm very curious, so if any of you out there have come across any sort of reports like this, definitely shoot me a comment in the comment section, because I'm definitely interested in that idea. Also, I think that since I don't believe the Sasquatch would want to spend a lot of time in these orchards and various crops around Avocado Lake, I think they're going to retreat to a safe haven. And I absolutely believe that this area around Avocado Lake, and especially along the Kings River here, would be an absolute perfect location for them to hunker down during the daytime. So I think they could go in, hit those crops at those opportune hours between 2 and 4 a.m. and come out of the area and then hunker down in the thick vegetation that is surrounding Avocado Lake and surrounding the Kings River here. And this oasis, this thick vegetation oasis, does go down all the way down into the San Joaquin Valley along the Kings River. So I'm sure by exploring more of the Kings River banksides, you're going to find other locations that are also ideal for the Sasquatch to hunker down in. So it's definitely some interesting things to think about. I do think that this is a prime Sasquatch habitat, meaning not necessarily getting into it, coming down from the foothills, but definitely moving along the Kings River and along the other tributaries that are feeding into the Kings River, because there's definitely enough places for them to hide, hunker down during the afternoon, and there's absolutely just an abundance of food for them down here. So I'm going to swing the camera around again so that you can see the hillside from another vantage point coming behind us here. And as you can see, again, the hillsides that are, the foothills that are coming out of the Sierra Nevadas down into the San Joaquin Valley here are again very sparsely treed there. I mean, there's some oak trees at the top of the ridge there, but generally the whole area is just open grassland. And I absolutely think that the Sasquatch would avoid these areas if they have an option to do so. And here along the Kings River, as I pointed out, they do have that opportunity. And again, I've mentioned it a number of times already, the vegetation is very thick. It's very difficult to get through this area. There are some spots that is a little more open, as you can see there. But along the rivers themselves, it gets very thick. I'm going to zoom in here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So this vegetation is very difficult to get through, for sure not for a Sasquatch, and it also makes for a perfect location for them to hunker down during the afternoon and get out of the heat. And then once it gets dark, and the people that are fishing along the Kings River and the people that are enjoying the recreations here around Avocado Lake will be out of the area, because the Avocado Lake recreational area, it does shut down just after sunset. So once that happens, the people are going to be required to leave the area, and I think it makes for an opportune time for the Sasquatch to move through the area. As noted, the Sasquatch are generally moving around. They're quite active between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And honestly, there's not going to be a lot of people out in these areas. So one thing I'll point out is along the roads here, you have this really fine crushed sand that makes a really good medium to find footprint tracks. So it's definitely a good thing to kind of move around on these roads, just looking for any sort of physical evidence that the Sasquatch may be moving through this area. And you can also identify a lot of the wildlife that's also calling this area home. After spending a considerable amount of the morning and early afternoon investigating Avocado Lake and the surrounding area, I wanted to head up into the mountains to get a better understanding of the habitat along the Kings River and to try and determine the most likely approach the Sasquatch would take when entering into the San Joaquin Valley. So as the Sasquatch are moving along these canyon waterways, I do think they like to escape the afternoon sun by taking refuge underneath these bridges, and I think it is an absolute perfect location to be looking for any sort of physical evidence that the Sasquatch are moving through an area. However, a word of caution, other animals also like to hide underneath these bridges as well, and caution is absolutely advised. Another place worth investigating are storm drains. There have been numerous reports of Sasquatch taking refuge in them to escape weather or the scorching sun. However, it is never advisable to get inside of these drains, and extreme caution should be maintained at all times when near them. After exploring the Kings Canyon drainage and other areas of interest along the lower Sierra Nevada mountains, it was time to head back into the San Joaquin Valley and prepare for another evening of investigations. Okay, I just heard something moving in the brush here. It didn't sound particularly large. But I'm also smelling like that dead animal smell again. It's like a rotting carcass. Honestly, I don't know what that smell is. It's really strong. I don't hear the motion, the movement that I heard earlier. Okay. I'm definitely getting that creepy vibe. But, yeah, I can't really smell that stench anymore. It has gone away, but I didn't hear any movement. So definitely a couple of interesting evenings here investigating the Avocado Lake area. That unbelievable stench, that rotting meat smell that I smelt again tonight. We smelt it last night and again tonight, but tonight I actually heard something moving through the brush when I caught a whiff of that stench. It smells almost like when you encounter roadkill, like a dead deer on the side of the road and it's been decomposing for a while. It's just that dead animal smell, very unpleasant smell. And this time I smelt it while I was hearing movement through the brush. Now I couldn't tell if the animal that was moving through the brush or whatever it was large or if it was just smaller but scurrying through the leaf litter in the area. I couldn't ascertain whether it was a large animal or a small animal. I just think it's intriguing that I caught that odor, that stench of rotting meat as I was hearing the sound of that movement through the brush. Now the previous evening, last night, when I caught the stench, it was a lingering smell. It smelled like it was there in the air for a lot longer, and I didn't hear any movement through the brush. So I don't know if that is an inkling that the whatever was putting out that odor was hunkered down somewhere, was remaining stationary, and was just exuding that scent. There's a lot of reports that say that the Sasquatch has a foul odor about it. So I do find that very intriguing. However, in my investigation of this area right now, I haven't reached any conclusion that the Sasquatch are in the area at the moment. From my previous research and investigation of this area, I do believe the Sasquatch come down off the Sierra Nevadas and move down into the San Joaquin Valley near Avocado Lake, but generally towards the end of November, early December. However, as I mentioned before, perhaps the creek fire and the bullfrog fire may be encouraging them to move down into these lower elevations. But that being said, also the temperature is still a little higher than I would think that the Sasquatch would care to find themselves in. Right now it is a little chilly. I do have the coat on, but it's only it's probably within the 60s, maybe low 60s, high 50s, but in the daytimes it's still getting into the mid to higher 80s and probably into the low 90s in the warmer days. So I generally don't think the Sasquatch like to be in those higher temperatures, and I think that's why they stay at those higher elevations. But again, maybe the fires have encouraged them to move down into the valley a little earlier this year. So definitely an interesting 2 nights investigating the Avocado Lake area. It is getting very late or early, as the case may be. I think we are probably pulling out of that 2 to 4 a.m. time frame there. So I think it is time to wrap things up and maybe head out of the area. But definitely an exciting place to be investigating, and I was definitely a little more on edge this time because of the idea that the creature that was being spotted here was that Dogman. I didn't like the idea of encountering a werewolf type creature that has a history of being a little more aggressive and a little more prone to attacking humans. So that definitely raised the adrenaline level for me as I moved around through the area. But thank the maker, besides the unusual stench and the movement that I was hearing through the woods here, I didn't really encounter anything that was heart-wrenching. So that is good. So I am going to head back out and get back to my vehicle and call it a night, because we are probably pulling into probably close to 4 o'clock. We're probably pulling out of that perfect opportunity tune time between 2 and 4. And again, I think we'll probably catch the sunrise here shortly. So I'm going to call it a night because it has been a long day and I am absolutely exhausted. Investigating Avocado Lake and the surrounding area, it has become abundantly clear to me why the Sasquatch are being spotted in this area. The Sasquatch are coming down from the Sierra Nevada mountains and are venturing into the San Joaquin Valley in search of food. This Central California valley is one of the largest produce producing areas in the world, so there's an absolute abundance of food in the area. Avocado Lake and the Kings River are strategic for the Sasquatch because they provide vegetation cover that will allow the Sasquatch to move into the San Joaquin Valley undetected, and the thick vegetation around Avocado Lake provide the perfect safe haven for the Sasquatch to retreat to after raiding the nearby crops. Though this investigation was prompted by a reported Dogman sighting, I am not convinced that these creatures are real, and I suspect that the sightings were misidentifications. However, I am 100% convinced that the Sasquatch are real. They live in the forests of the California Sierra Nevada mountains, and based on the numerous eyewitness reports and the data coming out of the Avocado Lake area, I am firm in my belief that the Sasquatch do venture into this area. And with the active fires burning through my research area, I will very likely be spending more time investigating Avocado Lake and the surrounding area. Again, I want to thank all of you for joining me on this quest for answers into this incredible mystery, and for the love and support you've been showing me. Stay safe and take care, and until next time, I'm Darrin Smith, and I'll see you here at squatchspot.com.